Okay, so I wanted to jump in on this to try to help clarify this for certain people, um, and maybe even a little bit for myself. So this is really just discussing about TI and what TI is all about, how it's different, and if you are a high valuing TI individual, we'll get into that. But the reverse is also true. If you are low in TI or TI polar, you should also realize how you don't really do these things or you're not really interested in these things, right? So, this is a good visual aid of what TI people are kind of doing. Okay, this is just an example of it. There's different ways to manifest it. But one of them is something like this, right? If we go into taxonomy in biology, for example, you need to create a structure, you need to create definitions to define what goes into what part of the structure, what doesn't go into that structure. What is the structure about? What is it not? So you have to create definitions. You have to be able to articulate clearly what is that definition, what is included in that definition, and what is not. This fits and this does not fit. So if you looked at a chart, something like this, again in biology, you have a hierarchy, a structure. You have things starting from the really big domain, eukaryotes that fit in there, what kingdom, animal kingdom, the phylum, the class, the mammals, order, blah, 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 right? And it keeps going. Now you have to know what qualifies to fit in each particular level. You have to define those things. So lots of definitions have to go into it, lots of organization and structure. Usually, but not always, you have to have a hierarchy. Some things belong above something else in order for things to fit, but not always. That part's a little bit more, you got some wiggle room in there. Now, for some people, you may look at, in this case, you see a fox. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a fox. Fine. But if you really wanted to organize the whole thing, what domain does it fit in? What kingdom does it fit in? What phylum, what class, and so on, right? Now, a lot of things that we run into with typology is very TI, especially if you're playing with socionics. It's part of the reason why you run into a shitload of TI valuing types in socionics specifically. But you also run into a lot of them in other typology systems a lot. Personally, I think you end up running into a lot more of the thinking TI valuing types in socionics with some of the TE people. I think you run into tons of these people. And meanwhile, I think you can almost see more feely types kind of enjoying Enneagram more or enjoying a few other systems. Enneagram really comes to mind. Trait systems, you might see a lot of TE. And you might run into a lot of feelers and intuitive types that really like to play with astrology shit and other things that get really, really weird like that. Okay. Now, that's one of my theories. Why is that though? Again, it's the natural desire for certain people to follow their elements, right? TI types, socionics. Socionics has a lot of definitions, a lot of structure to it. Not only do you have to define, understand the elements and what they are, but then you also have to define the domains that they cover, what qualifies as a sensory thing, what does not, what qualifies as an intuitive thing, and what does not. You have to define these things. Then you create the model A structure or model G for those people who like that or whatever. Then there's that model. What defines where things go within the model and the value in which they have. Lots of definition, lots of structure, lots of order. Looks a lot like these kinds of charts. Very sciencey. So other things that look like this, you can look at periodic tables, right? You have to define what goes here, what goes there, what's this atom, what's that atom. Oh, great. Now I can put everything in its proper order, in its proper place. Everything has its spot, right? And now everything relates to everything else in a very specific way because it's been defined Because it's been defined, everything falls into a specific place. For my FI polar or people that are weak on FI, they're not particularly interested in that. To them, it's like, listen, I see a fox. I don't need to organize everything. I'm not so concerned with defining everything so neatly. They may even feel that things cannot be defined neatly. Oh, I mean, this creature is just this, and how could you really define that? Right? This really works well if you want to use the biology example of certain species that look very similar to another species visually. When you, as a human with your own eyes, look at it, you go, wow, that looks so much like this creature here. They must be related. But when we look at the actual taxonomy, they're not. They're part of completely different families and so on. And you're like, well, why? Well, because you got to look a little bit deeper onto how they're being defined and categorized, the bone structure or something else that they're doing or whatever the fuck, right? At the moment, I don't have anything that comes to mind exactly, but there are creatures that are like this in biology. Okay. Some some TI polar types may have issues with certain typology systems like Socionics or even MBTI or things like that because of the fact that they have a very hard time maintaining this kind of order and structure in their head, or they may reject it altogether. They're just like, nah, listen, you know, I don't like all these little particular definitions. How can you really truly define that? These little definitions are so arbitrary. You could mix them up and change it around. You could, you know what, throw this creature and put it into that box there. What difference does it make? Right? They may really dislike that. By contrast, when you're looking at high TI people, they really like that. They spend a lot of time organizing, structuring, and defining their understanding of a particular topic. That's what I want to also stress here. I know I'm giving you an example of a biology, taxonomy. I'm giving you examples of periodic tables, right? Really sciencey shit. But understand, it doesn't have to be this either. You can have TI people who are very religious minded, perhaps, has nothing to do with science, but they really want to structure the understanding of their particular religion, of their particular belief, and show how their belief structure or this is tightly defined, is neatly organized, and how it is different from a whole nother religion or a whole nother philosophy and so on, right? That's what you're noticing. That's the focus I want you to understand. It is that they are creating classifications. They are understanding how this works versus that. It is organizing the information and structuring it, defining things neatly. People who don't care about TI or are very weak in TI do not define things very neatly, or they don't really seem to care very much. They may often screw that part up when they're arguing, discussing something, that they just run into something and they throw an example or something out there and they don't realize that they are potentially putting things that are contradictory in there. Contradictory in the sense that this is what we defined it as. You just threw something in there that no longer fits that definition, that criteria. This doesn't work. It's contradictory. You notice this a lot. I see this a lot with your ILEs and SLEs. Actually, I see this the most with them. Surprisingly, LIIs seem to be very light on this. And maybe it's something to do with the LIIs trying to be very open minded about bringing in as many different examples and possibilities and then analyzing and wondering, maybe there's something more to it. LSIs, SLEs, ILEs tend to come across a lot more assertive and a lot more aggressive on what fits the structure, what fits that definition, and what does not. They tend to come across a lot more aggressive on demanding that you define your topics, define your terms, define your definitions, define where things go. If you said that it's this, well, then now that's the standard that it has to meet. And if you just start throwing shit into that doesn't meet that, we have a problem. You've disorganized everything. They have a desire to structure and organize their thoughts, organize their environment, and so on. In the case of the SLE or the LSE or LSI, excuse me, they particularly like to organize their environment. They like to structure how the business is running. They like to structure their staff, the people around them, put them in their organization place. Think of a military hierarchy, right? That's another good one that a lot of people don't understand. Can we get something? Let's see. To me, this is second nature, but a lot of people don't understand this shit. Whatever, give me any one of them. Bam, right? Military. This is why we often say that SLEs and LSIs are often in military army structures and things like that, because there's a structure to it. There's a hierarchy. There's a way in which you organize people. Everyone has a job and a role to play that is based on that structure. And it doesn't matter who the individual is. What matters is the role they're playing, the rank at which they're at. Right? Basic stuff here. All the enlisted guys, the officers of different ranks. And there's a lot of people that if you're not military and you're not a military fanatic or whatever, you don't understand any of this. Right? All these different things to demonstrate hierarchy, structure, classification. It has nothing to do with the individual, which is FI kind of stuff. Right? It doesn't matter who that person, it just matters who the rank is and what the role is that they're playing. Right? I'm military, so I get this, but there's lots of people that they don't understand this stuff. They think everybody's the same in the military, but they don't, or they just think there's only like 3 ranks. Right? Guy in the middle, big guy on top, and then just the guy in the field. And it's like, no, there's a lot of structure to it. There's a lot of ways of categorizing it, right? And it gets even more complicated. There's a lot of things in life that are like this, right? But because of the structure, the layering, the hierarchy, blah, 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 because how government is often structured and layered and so on, you see a lot of TI valuing types tend to be interested in those kinds of topics. They tend to really get involved in that. Whereas usually people who are TI polar or weak in TI, or they don't value TI or whatever, they usually don't care about these kinds of things. All right. Or they really don't give a shit about the pecking order and the rank. They don't pay attention to it. Doesn't matter. Right. So let me give you a demonstration of one of the things that I'm also referring to here. Real person. Here's one of my videos that you can find. This was a typing session that Jack did a while ago. And I wanted to demonstrate how this person really is an ILE, their TI valuing, and their FI polar. And you can kind of see her interests in the hierarchy, the taxonomy, the structure, all of that stuff, but not really understand how she feels about individuals. She can't really individuate the person, like, who are you and how do I feel about you, specifically you unique thing, right? She cares more about the structuring and the organizing of stuff. And you notice that Jack jumps in because he also really enjoys that kind of thing as well. He connects with how she feels completely. So you can see here, I even asked her about taxonomies, and this was months ago. So listen to this.
Do you enjoy taxonomies in biology, studying the family tree branching out over time?
Oh, yes.
Look
yes,
at her light up.
I love phylogeny.
Ooh, I love that.
Poster over here.
Woo!
It's like the tree of life.
She looks like a kid at Christmas with presents.
I love phylogeny.
I love it.
The different ways in which like protostomes versus dingostomes and
oh my, tell me more.
Differences, like how people primates might not be
look how expressive all of a sudden.
Morphology.
Look at all that energy.
But in fact, they are very similar to rats. Rodents, rodentia, and primates are very close to each other because the earliest primates looked essentially like rodents. So there's a ton of really interesting.
Keep going, girl. You're on a roll.
I think it's cool.
There's the flying lemurs, sort of like the first to sort of break away from the rest of the glias. And from then came...
Well, even Jack's jumping in too, because he's an ILE also.
What I really like, say, I actually had this sort of quiz. When we were doing lockdown, I put together a quiz I present two animals and then a third animal. And I asked them to tell me which of the two animals is that third animal more closely related to, and made it as difficult as possible. I had tenrecs.
She loves
I had hedgehogs.
She's disappointed she wasn't there.
To make it a special. I put a kangaroo. No, not a kangaroo. No, I put a human being. I put what did I?
Okay, so you could watch that some more, but the point I want you to see really is how they really, you know what? Let me. Okay, what I want you to see is how interested these TI types are in structuring and organizing things. They really enjoy doing that to most of their life, most of the things around them, if not damn near everything. But they enjoy putting things in that taxonomy like structure. Things have a hierarchy. There's a reason why things go here and go there and go here. And you have to be able to create definitions, nice, tight definitions that allow something to qualify to go here and something to qualify to go there. And if it doesn't meet that qualification, if it doesn't meet it, it's out. It goes over there. It goes somewhere else, right? In order to know something goes here, I have to know what doesn't belong, right? They usually enjoy that kind of stuff. SLEs, you'll see it a lot. If you see Damon Gray, he appears in his interviews, he appears in a lot of conversations with people. And one of the things that he talked about a lot too was definitions. He argued a lot all the time with people about MBTI, Keirsey, different systems. And his big issue was we have to define what we are talking about. Which system do you want to use? Are we talking Enneagram right now, or are we talking this? Are you want to talk Keirsey and or MBTI definitions, or are we talking Socionics definitions? What are we talking about? Define it so that we can move forward. SLEs do that a lot, and they will be sticklers for that. And they will be all over you if they feel like you're just not defining stuff adequately, right? It's not organized. What do they all have in common? It's the TI. They're TIing the shit out of things. Types that don't really care much for TI stuff, they're not as interested in that. And where they can trip up, if you're TI polar, making arguments where things just don't, there's no definition, there's no structure to shit at all. The Bruce Lee videos, I have a Bruce Lee video in there. Some of us like to think of Bruce Lee as an SEE and that he was TI polar. Why? In his interviews and his whole, who he was, he did not really care at all about the structure of different systems and different martial arts and so on. And he never really defines what anything really is. He basically just says a lot of stuff to just be practical, just do whatever the fuck works. If it works and you like it, then do it. But he never bothers to really classify anything. He doesn't describe or define anything. What art is better at what art is for this, he doesn't bother. He doesn't care to. There's no defining of anything. And that's a good example of how a TI polar might manifest, right? Not necessarily that they just say something stupid or trip all over themselves, but perhaps that you just see a desire to never really bother to define and adequately organize and structure their ideas and thoughts. They're kind of not really interested in doing that. Ironically, they sometimes may end up organizing some things and then writing a little book and structuring some stuff without realizing that they're doing it, or they might even deny that they're doing it. They might say, "Oh, I wasn't trying to do that." It's like, yeah, it looks like you did though. So it's an example for what TI really looks like. And by its opposite, if you're TI polar or you don't value TI, you're not going to be interested in doing that. You don't want to do that. You don't like everything being all tightly organized. You may not believe that things can be organized and structured. This is what we're going to notice. This is why TI can look rigid in certain people. Why LSIs, for example, can be very, very argumentative. If you listen to Jack, when he's debating and arguing with people, he's also very quick to point out this doesn't work, that doesn't fit. No, because that doesn't meet the definition of this. how are you defining that? That doesn't make sense, and that doesn't work. It doesn't meet the criteria to be here. And he comes across kind of rigid. And then people want to say that he's an LSE or he's something else, whatever. He's just TIing the shit out of it, is all he's doing. And you will see SLEs do the same thing. There's a few of them out there. I mentioned Damon Gray. He does a lot of that too in his discussions and interviews. He's an SLE. DJ Granville has a channel and so on is out there. He does a lot of shit like that too, where he'll attack your definitions and he'll go after this doesn't fit that criteria, doesn't fit this. He's TIing the fuck out of it, right? So lots of examples, just some food for thought on what is TI, whether you have it or don't have it. Maybe this helps a few people. I hope so. Let me know what you thought of it. Let me know if it makes any sense to you, or if you want anything else kind of cleared up. As always, give me your likes, give me your subscribes, you know, etc.